welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. This is our 5th podcast, and the support that I've received from listeners like you has been great. I appreciate your comments and suggestions about what you've heard, and if there's something that you would like addressed or someone you would like to hear from, please let me know. You can send me an email at bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com, or you can visit the Band Talk Charlie Facebook page and leave a comment there. You know, it was on March 11 when the National Basketball Association player Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz tested positive for the coronavirus. And it was a matter of hours that the NBA suspended their season and the nation followed suit. Now we're hearing from more and more states that schools, as we remember them, are over for this academic year, and teachers will deliver the remainder of their instruction through various distance learning platforms. You know, during this time, I've been trying to find something to watch on television other than news of the coronavirus and all the related positioning and propaganda that is accompanying it. So I was flipping through the channels, I came across a PBS station that was airing an episode of the new Ken Burns documentary on country music, and it immediately captured me. I went on and purchased the entire series, and my wife and I began to take the next 8 evenings, and we viewed every episode. To put it simply, it is fantastic. It is so well done. The artistry and storytelling, the dialogue, the interviews, some of the greatest photographs you will ever see, and the various performances of country music. I just can't recommend it enough. And as I do with most everything I watch or read, I keep a notepad with me so I can write down some things I want to remember. And this country music documentary had so many memorable lines. And one I feel is so important as we all wrap our arms around teaching our students from a distance. And it has to do with the element of doubt that we all deal with. The line was simple. If you're not going to believe in yourself, who will? Well, that question has 2 answers. As a teacher, we have to believe in ourselves, and hopefully we have the life experiences to help us do just that, believe in ourselves. But the second part comes from the side of the student. Our second interview today is with a former student of mine who I'll introduce a bit later. And he said something to me that has stuck since the time we did the recording. He said, "You believed in me before I believed in myself." Wow. That may be the highest compliment I have ever been paid as a teacher. And as I thought about it more and more, I realized that yes, that is the job of the teacher. You have to believe in every student. You have to believe that every student can learn. And yes, you have to believe that every student can learn through distance learning. It may not be what you had hoped. You're not able to see them face to face. And probably the thing that pains you the most is that you can't stand on the podium and make music in real time. No more rehearsals or concerts. But your students can, and your students will learn because you believe in yourself and you believe in them. Today's podcast is going to feature 2 segments. The first is with Jeff Connor, trumpet player and leader of the Boston Brass. I had the honor to have the Boston Brass open our Midwest Clinic concert with the Vandercook Band in 2003. though during the course of the interview, neither one of us could remember the date. But I do remember that performance very well, and I remember them performing Wayside Festival. It was an outstanding way to start a concert. In addition to being a great musician and trumpet player, Jeff is just a great person. He's a soft-spoken giant. He's one of these folks that pushes others out in front so they can shine. I hope you were able to hear the Boston Brass at the 2019 Midwest Clinic, where they blew the roof off the place on Thursday evening, and then presented a truly masterful clinic on Friday. I know you will enjoy our conversation. The second part of today's podcast is a former student of mine, John Armato. Now, I had better get this right because while we were talking, I could not correctly articulate his title for the life of me. But John is senior partner and creative strategist for the Fleishman-Hillard Public Relations firm, and he's based in Sacramento, California. He's going to share some lessons that he's carried with him from high school band into the corporate world. I know you're going to enjoy that one, too. It's going to be a great show, and I'm so glad that you're listening. We'll be right back.
Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends is made possible through the support of Hal Leonard, Eastman Musical Instruments, Con Selmer, and Vandercook College of Music.
So joining us for this segment of Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends is a gentleman who has become a dear friend since the first time we had an opportunity to work. Gosh, it's been 10 or 15 years ago. His name is Jeff Connor, and Jeff is the leader and trumpet player in the wonderful ensemble, the Boston Brass. Jeff, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Charlie. It's a pleasure.
I'm trying to recall, it had to be 15 years ago when the Boston Brass opened up our concert at the Midwest Clinic, and it was really exciting and invigorating. And how long had you, as an ensemble, been together then, if you can remember?
Well, the group started back in 1986, and that's when I was a graduate student at Boston University. So that's when the group started, just a group of friends that enjoyed playing chamber music together. We were incredibly fortunate to have as our first teachers and coaches and mentors the Empire Brass. They were artists in residence at Boston University back then. And their tuba player, of course, at the time was Sam Palafian. So Sam was our, really first teacher and coach and mentor. And, looking back then, I never would have imagined that 28 years later, Sam would become a member of Boston Brass. And Sam played with us 4 or 5 years. So we are so incredibly, fortunate to have Sam with us. And then we've had the privilege of playing with the Vandercook Wind Ensemble a couple times at Midwest. So we have great warmth for that school.
Well, thank you, and they continue to get better and better. Not Vandercook, well, they do too, I hope, but the Boston Brass does. This past December, you guys put on an incredible performance at the Midwest Clinic, and I even thought the one better than your performance, and your performance was great because you had all these wonderful artists joining you, but was your clinic the next day, and I thought that clinic was just over the top.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Charlie. That really means a lot. That's something that we've really, over the last probably 8 or 9 years, really become, kind of a central focus to the group and that's something that we learned from Sam, no matter where we are in the world, is to leave as big a footprint as we can. So that outreach of music education, that outreach of working with students is something that has become really important for the group, and in terms of just the legacy of the band. So having the opportunity to work with middle school, high school, college professionals, students, working with educators is something that we really enjoy and find that's really important. So, and we appreciate everybody that came out to the clinic as well.
Well, it was wonderful, and I had a chance to see another clinic that you did actually at Vandercook probably 2 years ago now. And I was just so impressed because each one of you have an incredible story to tell. And the one I keep retelling is your wonderful horn player, Chris Castellanos. I believe that's his name. Right?
Yeah.
And he talked about being a kid in his junior high school, and he wanted to get better, and he wasn't playing on a very good horn. And I remember him saying, my teacher told me if I want to get better, to go home with my horn, and all he needed to do was to open the case and set it on his bed. And I laughed at that. And he says, of course, I had to start playing it, and that's miraculously.
But that's the first step. That's the first step. You take your instrument home, you take it out of the case, and you put it on your bed or in the living room or the kitchen table or someplace where it's just always looking at you. So it's like you pass it, and it's like, oh, I should pick you up. Yeah.
And everybody has a story to tell. So tell us your story. How did you get started?
Well, I would not be talking to you today if it was not for my middle school and high school band director. And no matter where we are in the world, and especially in the U.S., at every concert, I always thank my middle school and high school band director, and also just music educators. All music educators just talk about how important they are and how they're making the world a better place. But I grew up outside of Boston, about 45 minutes, and had a very traditional music education upbringing. Played in middle school band and jazz band, and then in high school was in everything, jazz band and wind ensemble and orchestra, and just had a great time. I mean, I had great band directors and good ensembles, and we had a marching band, but it was very small. I think we may have made an H for Holliston, where we were from. It may have looked like an H, but that's about as far as marching band went, but that's okay. And then kind of what really changed, one of the big things that changed my life was between my junior and senior year of high school. My high school band director, Al Easer, recommended me for the United States Collegiate Wind Band that was conducted by Al and Gladys Wright. From Purdue, just legends in the band world. And then, circle back about 30 years later, I see them again, multiple times through American Band College. And so that summer I went over to Europe for 3 weeks, and, with an ensemble made up of high school and some early college students. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And then the following year, I decided, I wanted to go into music, and I had the opportunity to go out to Tanglewood to the Empire Brass Symposium, Tanglewood being the summer home of the Boston Symphony, and spent a month out there before my freshman year of college. And that was life-changing, as you can imagine. And that's when I decided, kind of studying with the Empire Brass, that's what I wanted to do the rest of my life. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was going to figure it out, and nobody was going to tell me I couldn't do it. So.
Yeah. So you started the ensemble in '86. When did you guys really start touring? You got hooked up at first with, was it Jupiter Instruments?
No, actually, well, we have had the great opportunity. I mean, so many great people, as you know, in the music industry, the music world. We first started with United Musical Instruments before it was even Conn-Selmer.
Right.
And then, once that joined, it became Conn-Selmer. We were with them for a while, and then we were with Jupiter, and then we're incredibly fortunate to be with Yamaha for the past almost 4 years now. So we're incredibly blessed to be with them. Their support of Boston Brass, support of music education is just incredible. But it took, before we started, I mean, we were part-time, and we were just freelancing around the Boston area. We were playing graduations, weddings, church services, special events, and this is in the analog days. So it was just sending out cassette tapes and folders about about the group, and just calling everybody, as many people as you could. You look through the newspaper and see what's going on, and just, that's how it was done. And this was before we had management or an instrument sponsor. And then we got hooked up with an agency out of Minneapolis, Allied Concert Services, about 10 years into the band. And that's kind of when we first started touring. And that's when about a year or so before J.D. Shaw had joined the group. So
Right.
that kind of, once J.D. joined, that really changed the focus of the band. He brought his arranging chops, which was incredible. And then we kind of looked at the whole group differently in terms of a product. We wanted to become producers of music, not just consumers of music. So that's when we memorized our show. We kind of thought of, the programming, everything, the talking, kind of everything. We learned really how to be a band. And then going out for our first real tour was a month long. And that teaches you how to be a band. You come out of there still talking, you got a chance.
Yeah, still talking to each other, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So obviously the coronavirus has put a halt to performances for a while. And so
Mm-hmm.
Tell me all the things you had lined up before this thing hit.
Well, we're still, as of today, we're March 16th, we are, still figuring things out. Last Friday on the 13th, we were supposed to be in Chicago for the Chicago Brass Festival. It was all a go. We showed up on Thursday and got off the plane and found out that the university had shut down. So we got back on a plane and everybody went home. Fortunately, everything that we've had that's been canceled will be postponed. So we'll go into it next season. We were supposed to be in Austria in April, and that will happen April of 21 now. We have some concerts in Wyoming and Ohio coming up, and we're still, those will probably need to be, later on in the season. We're supposed to make our first trip to Russia in May, and we're still finding out about that. That probably will be postponed. So it is, it's definitely, every group, it's just kind of, shut everything down, but we want everybody, to be safe and healthy. And, the virtual thing has caught on. So I have some students and, just going to be doing FaceTime lessons with them. And, I think everybody's just pitching in and doing what we can to keep music alive and make sure we come out of it okay.
Yeah, you've got an ensemble and you have to keep the ensemble together. And obviously you get together and rehearse probably for several days before you hit tours and things like that. So what kind of advice would you give teachers who are listening in the podcast about how do you keep an ensemble together from a distance, without FaceTime with them? Not FaceTime the computer program, but FaceTime sitting in a classroom with them, sitting in a rehearsal hall with them. You got any suggestions that they might consider?
Yeah, and I think it's, for different levels, depending if you're talking middle school, high school, or college, there's different approaches. And, you're just reading on Facebook now, everybody's trying to figure out, this online learning and what best way to do it and approach. And, it's really become a community of trying to, what's going to be best for the students. And, I think you look at middle school students and even high school students. I have a son who's in, senior in high school, and, they're trying to figure just life out now as opposed, and I think just keeping them, listening to music, listening to recordings of the pieces you're playing in band, just kind of keep them, maybe give them small assignments on, what to practice, make sure they have their instruments. I know all the schools in Massachusetts, that are now shut down till April 7th, all the students are able to go in today and, they can go and get their instruments, or they can go to school if they need to get supplies or whatever. So I know a lot of the schools are letting kids go in and, in the band programs so they have their instruments for the next few weeks. I think just be learning, almost teaching them how to become an active listener, giving them things to listen to and, maybe to talk about and see what, get suggestions on their instrument. Because a lot of times, a lot of these students don't, if they're a bassoon player or a French horn player, they've never heard a professional bassoon player, horn player. So they don't know what that sounds like. They may know what the person that's sitting next to them in band sounds like, but they don't have that real sound. So giving them the opportunity, maybe suggestions okay, here's a list of great trumpet players, great horn players, great flute players, and have them listen to. So I think becoming a really proactive and active listener is really important. Now, taking that time to teach them that, and hopefully they just keep, the horns on their faces and, do a little playing. So when everybody's back, they just get right back into the groove again.
So what trumpet players does Jeff Connor listen to?
Oh, what you would think. My favorite is Doc Severinsen, Maynard Ferguson. I had the incredible privilege my main trumpet teacher was Tim Morrison. Who is still a dear friend today. He comes out and conducts our big band holiday show a lot when we're out on the road. And Tim, for all of our listeners, you've all heard Tim Morrison play the trumpet. He played with the Boston Symphony and Boston Pops. He was a member of the Empire Brass for a few years, and just about everything John Williams wrote that had a trumpet solo was written for Tim. So the Summon the Heroes was dedicated and written for Tim Morrison, and that trumpet solo was Tim. Born on the 4th of July, JFK, all those great trumpet solos are Tim. He's one of my favorites. Clifford Brown, Wynton, of course. And then, I just love listening to, Tower of Power, Earth, Wind and Fire, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Chicago, all those horn bands.
That's great. Yeah, that's great stuff. That is great stuff.
Nothing like it. Nothing like it.
So Jeff, you wake up in the morning, you say, okay, I got to go practice. And you open the case. Yes. So walk us through your warm-up routine.
Warm-up routine, it's fundamentals. It's all working on basics, long tones, lip flexibilities, scales, just trying to keep in shape. I'm kind of right now just really making sure that, all within Boston Brass are, all of our responsibility is to make sure that next time we go out on the road, we're prepared. And for everybody out there who's played in a quintet, you think, oh, you're in great shape at home. You've been doing you're practicing every day and putting lots of hours, and you get to the quintet rehearsal and it's like, oh my goodness, I thought I was in shape, so it's just, making sure that we're ready to go. That's why we always show up a day before, any masterclass, concert, rehearsal with another ensemble. And we do a full run through of the show. We rehearse any new pieces that we need to, so we make sure we're in shape and that we're ready to go for whatever we need to be doing for the next few days. And so it's just it is working on a lot of fundamentals, working on whether we have to memorize stuff, working on new music, even music we have. Always trying to make it better. We've never played a perfect show. We never will play a perfect show. Nobody will. But we're always striving for that, making it better, finding new things, within the music. So that's pretty much, in terms of what I'm working on when I can. I enjoy playing when he allows me with my son. My son's a trumpet player. So any chance I can get, if he says it's okay, I get to play with him, whether it's his orchestral music or jazz band music. I just, I really enjoy, playing with him. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Jeff, I hope you get back on the road real soon.
Thank you so much, Charlie. It's been an absolute pleasure. This is an incredible thing that you're doing, this podcast, and wish you all the success in the world with it, and hope lots of people, start listening and, downloading it. It's going to be a great resource for everybody in music.
Well, we're trying to do our best, and we, can't do this without great people like you. And I'm so honored to call you my friend, and I just wish you guys the best. And I know you're going to continue to influence lives through your performances and your interaction with people. And hopefully our paths will cross sooner rather than later.
Thank you so much, my friend. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your just continued and constant support, of the group. It really means a lot to us. So, and to me personally. So we appreciate it.
Okay. Talk to you soon, Jeff. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Charlie. You take care.
I just love talking to Jeff Connor. He is such an incredible human being. You can hear the honesty and sincerity in his voice, and he is a great person. And in addition to being a great person, he is an incredible musician. And I really love the fact that he suggested that we take time to help our students to become active listeners, providing them a list of professional musicians by instrument, giving them pieces of music to listen to, and direct their listening so that they know what to listen for. And when they hear that timbre, they hear that sound, they hear that artistry, it is going to make a mental implant and help them as they grow in their musicianship. We're going to be right back with a wonderful interview with John Armato, who talked about how his experiences in high school band have carried with him into the professional world. We'll be right back.
Vandercook College Music is proud to support Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Vandercook is the only college in the nation solely devoted to the practical education of the school music teacher. If you have a student who wants to teach music, or if you or someone you know is looking for a great, practical Master of Music education program, then look no further than Vandercook College of Music in Chicago, Illinois. Vandercook also has the largest array of on-campus and online classes in their Mecca continuing education program. To learn more about Vandercook, visit vandercook.edu.
So I'm in my, second or third year of teaching. And I go to the mailbox and there's a letter, hand addressed. Didn't really know what this was about. And I opened the letter, and it was the most beautiful letter of introduction I think I've ever received in my entire life. And it was from a young student who was coming to Winnetonka High School from Antioch Junior High School, who eloquently introduced himself and explained how excited he was to be able to be a member of the band at Winnetonka High School. That letter touched my heart, and he became a student at Winnetonka, and to this very day, he remains a dear friend and a trusted colleague, and his name is John Armato. And John's joining us on today's podcast. John, how are you?
Oh my gosh, Charlie, you just kill me with that story every time. I know you told it a couple of times, and you always sort of take me off guard with that. I'm doing well, and any day I get a chance to chat with you is a good day.
Well, thank you. And for those people that may not know, John Armato is a senior vice president with Fleishman-Hillard Public Relations out of Sacramento, California. And he was a percussionist. We don't want to use the word drummer because that's a bad term. So he was a percussionist in my high school band and has gone on to do many things. And most recently, he has come to my aid by creating the artwork for this podcast. So, John, your talents are amazing, and they are ever giving. So it's great that you're.
My pleasure.
Great that you're joining us today.
No, I'm delighted to be a part of it. You know, my career started as a freelance graphic designer, and then went into I did feature writing for magazines and newspapers and that sort of thing before I got into the agency world. But I don't design professionally anymore. But it's always nice to be able to sort of use those skills when necessary. So I was happy to do it.
Well, thank you so much, and you can do whatever you want. I mean, you're going to be a success no matter what you do. You know, you could be a professional car parker, and you'd be an amazing success. So
and it may come to that.
Well, no, because we can't get to people in this day and age. It's that whole social.
Yeah, exactly.
Get out of your car and leave it running, and I'll get to it in 10 minutes. And then
just walk away.
After we fumigate it and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, John, you grew up in a family of teachers. Your father was an educator for many, many years, and you have brothers and sisters that are in education. And really, in what you do now as a strategist for Fleishman-Hillard, you're always teaching clients and customers about.
Wow, I love it that you started there. I mean, that's first of all, because I value that family background so much. Dad was a junior high school teacher and then junior high school counselor in the Kansas City, Missouri Public School District. My brother Mark is a retired 8th grade history teacher. My sister Mary started her career as an elementary art teacher. My sister Kathleen has taught mathematics at private school for the gifted. She's taught at the university level, and she's now at a private high school. And thanks to you, I damn near became a band director, but I swerved at the last minute.
you finally saw the light, in other words, huh?
But education was a real value in my family. Mom had 1 year of college and always wished she'd had more. Dad was the first in his family. He's the son of a Sicilian immigrant who came to the United States when he was 16 and didn't speak the language, but built a business and raised a family. And Dad was the first in his family to get a degree, and in fact to get 2 degrees, went on to get his master's. So it was just always a high value in the family. And as it relates to music education, I would say in particular in our family, we all embrace the notion of liberal arts and the importance of the humanities and a broad range of exposure to different kinds of ideas, and that was just a part of my DNA from the earliest days.
So you look back at when we were together in high school many years ago. I mean, you had the opportunity to travel with the band to the Orange Bowl, and you had a chance to play alongside of Louis Bellson in the high school jazz band.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. What things did you get from being a member of a high school band that you didn't get in any other class in your school?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this, and to me, the band room experience, the band experience, and music in general, I think offer kids at that level. Really, there's 3 things that it's about. And I'm going to do the writerly thing here and give you my 3 B's. For me, it ended up being about beauty. It ended up being about belonging, and it ended up being about basic skills for success in life. And I think there's a straight line I can draw from specific band room lessons, so to speak, that I learned in high school to the success I've had in business and working with CEOs around the globe and working with major brands and organizations. A lot of those lessons are about how I learned to act, but ultimately I figured out later is also about how to lead. So that's sort of the premise of my thoughts on this. And I think the place to begin in my mind is sometimes actually overlooked, surprisingly, is around beauty. And, I see things people post on Facebook about the importance of music education because it teaches you math and science, and kids that are in band have higher scores here. All that's great. But the first value of music, in my opinion, is that music itself has value. It is a beautiful thing the world needs and people enjoy and are moved by. And that's, I think, really the first thing. But we can talk about all the things.
Well, that's interesting because just this morning I was looking at my Facebook feed, and a guy had posted a video of David Maslanka, the wonderful composer who is since deceased. But it was the last time he spoke, I think before his death, when he was at the Hart School of Music. And they were playing, I think, Symphony No. 4. And it's about a 4-minute clip on Facebook that I think people really need to hear. And he gets into talking about music and sound and the beauty of it. And and he said at the center of every tone is peace. And boy,
that's a beautiful thought.
It struck me, that when we make these wonderful sounds and we get into music, if you really get into the center of every sound, you'll find peace.
I love that idea. I've watched a couple of Pat Metheny interviews recently that have been popular since the recent passing of Lyle Mays, the piano player that he was associated with for so many years. And I'm just so struck by how Pat has remained so centered on that very idea, that there's something in every single note that is cause for joy. And that's what it's about for him. And he still can't put the guitar down before or after the concert because it's still such a joy for him. And I was talking to somebody recently. As you know, I'm working on an album. I still play, and I'm working on an album of ballads. And this person I was talking to said, "Well, what is it that makes you love ballads?" And I don't know. I think we get hung up on trying to define and structure things, and the beautiful part of music is I don't know that it needs a defense. I don't know that it needs an explanation. I don't know how how to account for the fact that there's this mechanical phenomenon of sound waves in the air that triggers this mechanical phenomenon of our eardrums vibrating, which then triggers this electrical response in our brains that somehow makes me cry when I hear Chopin's E minor prelude, or feel sad in the third movement of the Brahms Third Symphony, or feel ecstasy when I'm listening to First Circle by Pat Metheny. I don't know. All I know is that it's just wonderful. And to me, it's like, why do you like chocolate? Why do you like sex? I don't know, but I'm grateful for both, It's just...
Well, and the beauty thing has two sides to it also. I mean, let's take a look at the first side, is that as a listener, and we listen to music, and every one of us on our iPods, or I guess we still have iPods or phones or whatever we have that we listen to music, have this core repertoire that we go back to. I mean, for me, it's everything from Chuck Mangione's Chase the Clouds Away, or Bella Via, or to Willie Nelson, You Were Always on My Mind, or to Maynard Ferguson playing MacArthur Park, or Doc Severinsen doing something, or listening to the Dvorak
100%.
Serenade for Winds. I mean, and so there's
go ahead.
I see. So there's a beauty there that we have this repertoire that becomes very personal to us. And I'm not sure if it's the music, that's the sounds themselves, or if it's other events in our life that were happening when we were first introduced to those sounds.
Yeah, I've got an indefensible theory about that, which is that it may change over time. You mentioned things like Bella Via, and that immediately made me smile because of course we played that in every Golden Variety Band performance at Winnetonka that I can recall. And I have such warm memories of that, and I love that tune. Now, when I first heard it and when we first played it, in that moment, I think I was responding to the music in sort of a pure fashion. It was like this was new. I was hearing it. It's like, oh, I like that. That sounds good. And then, as you repeat that over the course of maybe 3 years, it becomes predictable, but predictably good. It's like, oh, I'm glad he's going to call that tune next. Now I'm looking forward to it. And now it's got anticipation and familiarity, and I get to do something I know I'm going to enjoy. And then, how long we've known each other 41 years, so 41 years later, when I hear that song, it's got the beauty it originally had. It has that anticipation and that familiarity that I came to expect, but now it's got that sweet nostalgia. It's got that ability to take me back in time, and it transports you. And I love it that music can follow us in that way and grow with us and morph its meaning depending on where we are in our relationship to it.
So that's a great transition to the second part of this whole beauty thing, and that is the beauty that we find as performers when we have the opportunity to play something and we know that we're playing it or at least to the best of our abilities at the time. There's a certain inherent beauty and a certain inherent feeling that we get that is impossible to explain.
I completely agree. I mean, there's been books written about the concept of flow and these sorts of things, what it means to be sort of consumed by the moment. and to be so thoroughly in the moment that time stops. And I've had this experience of sort of being outside of myself and almost sort of an observer of me as a performer, but also so inside of myself that I sort of lose touch with things around me. Now that's rare. To me, that doesn't happen frequently enough, but I have had those flow experiences, and that moment as a performer is, I think, the thing that if you get addicted to it, that's when you just can't ever walk away from music. That's something you want the rest of your life, and I've continued to play my entire life, and I can't imagine not playing. But what's interesting to me about what you bring up with that, a couple things. One is a few years ago, I was having a conversation with a really important person in my career, a guy by the name of John Onoda. He's one of the most experienced corporate communication guys in America. He had the top media relations job at McDonald's, the top corporate communications job at GM, Levi Strauss, Visa USA, Schwab, huge companies. He's exceptionally smart and talented. And he was talking about the notion of personal branding. What do you as an individual in your career stand for and want to be about, and how do you go about manifesting that intentionally? And I spent a lot of time thinking about, it's almost a cliche, but like a personal mission statement. And what is it I want to be and to accomplish? And what I ultimately landed on is that I want to create or be a part of moments of beauty. That's what I want my life to be about. And that relates to what you're describing as that sort of performer experience. I don't want to ever give that up. But there's a selfish aspect of it. It feels awesome, but there's a giving aspect of it too. I want other people to have that, and what that's meant in my professional life is I seek out those moments in my work where I can give something to other people. Now that may be advice to a client, it may be professional development to staff members or what have you, but it's probably that old DNA from my dad and my brothers and sisters who are educators, and that desire to impart something and to see the light bulb come on for someone else is as joyful for me as playing a beautiful piece of music.
And that's something that we have to realize, especially now, seeing as though we're dealing with the coronavirus and we're dealing with education in a whole new different forum, and that we're having to do distance learning with our kids, is that, it may be, we may have their undivided attention right now, whereas their friends aren't around to distract them in the classroom, and we can hopefully impart some of these life lessons to them in this tough time. So,
it's interesting. You've gone to the positive, and I went to the worry side. And one of the things I tell my clients is, you pay us to worry on your behalf. So I'm usually looking for the risk. And and my fear with distance learning is that the belonging part will be harder than ever. So to go back to, for me, what I see is the what you can get out of that band experience, beauty, belonging, and basic skills. The belonging piece to me is like, there may be kids who have no interest in playing the rest of their lives, but it's a tribe they find. And I look back and I think, if I hadn't found my tribe, I don't know what I would have been doing in school. I can't figure out where else I would have been, or where I would have found kindred spirits. And that idea of having your tribe, of being among people you can relate to or who share your passion, I think is so important. And I worry a little bit now if you don't have 85 or 25 or 150 or whatever it is, kids in the band room, are they going to have that sense of belonging?
Well, they're not going to have it in that same context. But as teachers, I think it's important that we remember that our kids in the classroom gravitate to us and become energized when we provide them positive feedback in front of their peers, especially. This helps to develop their whole self-esteem level, right? I'm somebody. And they have to do that now in the distance learning teaching too. When they're putting out lessons and they're getting information from kids, they have got to not be afraid to send out something to all the class and go like, we've been getting a lot of great assignments. We've given a lot of great, and I want to make a special shout out to Billy, who sent in this incredible performance on his instrument. And as I keep getting these wonderful performances, I'll make sure that, that I mention kind of thing, I
think that's incredibly important. And what you're describing is something that you were and are masterful at as a teacher. And that I know I was highly affected by that and am still influenced by it. And it's one of the big takeaways for me is I've been reflecting on the lessons from the band room, so to speak. Most of them, I think, had to do with, okay, how should I act as an individual for the betterment of my own, goals. But there is that set of lessons that were really not how to act, but how to lead. And I think your gift as an educator has been that you set uncompromising standards accompanied by unwavering support. And I've thought a lot about that over the years, and I'm known as a bit of a hard ass at the agency, maybe more so in the past. I am. I've mellowed a little bit, but especially in my early days, I was pretty relentless about, no, it's not good enough, and we've got to get it better. But the thing about setting up those uncompromising standards is that you can end up really being an asshole if you're not helping people achieve them through your own unwavering support. You got to believe that they're capable. You got to, if they've got gaps in their technique or skills, you got to help them overcome the gaps so that they've got the facility to achieve the standards. You've got to let them, and this is what you perhaps excelled at more than anything else. I mean, speaking for myself, you believed in me before I believed in myself. I think that that's one of the essential roles of a teacher.
Well, that's very kind, but I do think you're right. I mean, I think every child has the ability to succeed. They may not all succeed at the same level, but they have the ability to succeed. I got a wonderful note from a former student who I'm going to remain nameless, and I'm not sure you know him. You may have graduated before he was there, but he wrote and basically said that he was too young to become a member of this one band that we had at the school. But I looked at him and knew that he needed that experience more than maybe the band needed him. So I wrote a letter to his mom inviting him to be a member of this band. And he said it was the first time that my mother ever expressed how proud she was of me. My gosh! I started crying as I'm reading this note from this kid, and I mean, I think that's what teachers have to do. We have to look at the kid and say, okay, I kind of use this analogy that, inside of every chunk of granite, there's a statue.
Yeah, exactly.
The question is, how good of a sculptor are you, right? And And I've been one that's been a bad sculptor in terms of I made the wrong hit with the hammer and I completely destroyed the chunk of granite. I mean, there's been a lot.
I don't know about that, and not for this to become sort of sycophantic exchange, but I don't know that I've ever heard any stories of any kids who you destroyed with the wrong blow of the sculptor's hammer. But I do know of countless stories of my peers, guys and gals I went through band with, who, as we've talked in subsequent years, have said, and I'm not exaggerating, Charlie saved my life. Well, no, they don't say that. They say Mr. Mangini saved my life. Or he really turned me around, or he changed things for me. He made it possible. I mean, here's what, first of all, it's a huge testament to you, but I saw the same thing with my dad, and Dad's 91. He has Parkinson's disease. My mom passed away 6 months ago, and he's just moved into skilled nursing care. So, he's struggling, but, when he was 90, let's see, I'm trying to think this through here. I was home in Kansas City for my parents' 63rd wedding anniversary. And we had a small gathering, and there were some cousins came over and that sort of thing. And one of my cousins is dating a woman who we found out while we're sitting there chatting had dad as a counselor in junior high. And she said, "Oh, Mr. Armato, he really made things happen for me. He really changed my life. He really helped me get it together." And we used to joke as a family, and this is 90 years old. He's getting these testaments, you know what I mean? And we used to joke as a family, we can't go out in public as a family without somebody saying, "Hey, aren't you Mr. Armato? Oh, you were so good to me. You made such a difference." And then years later, as my brother, had gone through his career, "Oh, that's Mr. Armato." I'm like, "No, Dad's not here." "No, Mark Armato. Yeah, he really helped me," and seeing that kind of impact literally decades later, it's emotional for me, and it makes me just sort of fall in love with every teacher that realizes that potential, because that's just the greatest thing in the world.
I think every teacher gets that from their students. They may not hear it right now. And I think what teachers have to remember is that in their heart and in their head, they have a certain set of core values and a certain set of core beliefs. And they can't compromise those beliefs. They can't compromise those
That's
values. Right. They have to hold firm to them, even through some difficult times. I mean, we're going through difficult times right now in the world, but we have to hold firm to what we think is the right thing to do here, whether it's being self-quarantined or as a teacher to say, no, that's not good enough. I mean, we owe it that much to society. We owe that much to our students, which is our mini society that we kind of deal with.
Yeah.
And
I completely agree. And to connect the dots, because I know you want to talk about how my experience has affected me in the business world. I mentioned that I've been a rather rigorous taskmaster, at least in the past at the agency. And I remember several years ago, this was still, I started off in our Kansas City office of Fleishman-Hillard, and then I was in our New York City office for 4 years, and now I'm based in Sacramento. But when I was still in Kansas City, there was a junior member of the team. She was an intern, I think, when I first started working with her, and tremendous talent. But I pushed pretty hard, and there'd be writing assignments, and I'd be circling things and saying, "No, you're missing the point here, or this needs to happen earlier, or what about this strategy that we talked about for this message," or whatever. And I know she was frustrated by it. And then at some point, there was an assignment of hers that came to me, and it was great. And I just said, "Terrific work, no feedback. Put it back on her desk," or whatever. And a few months later, I was walking by her cube, and I saw it was tacked up on her wall. And it really reminded me, we don't know. We can't predict the impact we're going to have, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a manager in a business, whether it's anybody in any role in life. You can't know. You can't predict. There are moments that are passing and fleeting to you that are monumental and significant to the other person. And it's just impossible to know when that moment is. And that reminded me that you always have to maintain the standard, because it ultimately makes a difference.
Yeah, and when they attain the standard, or when they get to the point where you feel that they've done good work, it may not be perfect work, but it's good work, and it shows promise, and it shows better, then that's when we have to do it. And if you're a teacher, I say this to teachers all the time. When I went to the doctor, had my physical examination, and we're in for the consultation. Now here's a medical doctor, and here's a musical doctor, and we're sitting around this small table, and he takes out his pencil, and he goes, "Charlie, now let me tell you something. There are two kinds of cholesterol. There's good cholesterol," and he draws a happy face, "and there's bad cholesterol," and he draws a sad face. And he says, the most important thing is to get that good cholesterol higher and that bad cholesterol lower. And I thought about that. I said, well, here we are, two doctors, and we're communicating with happy faces, right? But I thought about it, and I said, geez, as a teacher, you're walking around the room, you're hearing something you like, you grab your pencil, you write a happy face on their music or on their method book. I mean, my God, that opens up their world, because it communicates so much more than you played that good. I like you. You're a good person. It's a great day. Keep up the good work. I mean, the power of art in such a primal form has such impact. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, I think you were the first person I heard say bad news in person, good news in writing, and I've tried to stick to that. And I try to do good news in person as well, but I'm not nearly as prolific a card writer as you are. It's a constant struggle and failing for me, but I try to write little notes to whomever when they're really doing something that I want to reinforce or affirm. And I don't blow smoke, but I am effusive when I want people to know, just like, my gosh, you keep getting closer to that bullseye, and this is great. But that I think that sort of affirmation, and as you say, sort of in a tangible fashion, put it on their paper, write them a note, send them a letter, is huge. That's stuff people save, and they save it because it made a difference to them.
Yeah. We're going to have a little bit more with John Armato in just a second, but I do want to take this time to say thank you to all of the people that are supporting this podcast. First of all, thank you to you for listening and helping us to continue to spread the word about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And I also want to thank our friends at Hal Leonard Corporation, Eastman Musical Instruments, Con Selmer, and Vandercook College of Music. We just can't do it without them. And in your community, you've got people that are supporting you, and I hope that during this time you'll do whatever you can to support them. We're all in this together, and anything we can do is going to make a difference. Okay, let's get back to our conversation with John. We're back with John Armato, Senior Strategist, Vice President of Public Relations, and all good things at Fleishman-Hillard Public Relations firm in Sacramento, California. A former student, a wonderful musician, an incredible thinker. And we've been talking about being a member of high school band and how that impacts, and how it impacts our kids and how it impacts our lives and all that good thing. So, John, we talked about beauty and we talked about belonging. So how did being a member of a music program, learning to play the percussion, the drums, how did that prepare you for the corporate world? What lessons did you take with you?
Well, it's a great question, and I've got several answers, but let me provide a little bit of context for people who may not be familiar with my industry. So Fleishman-Hillard is one of the world's largest public relations firms. We're in about 80 countries globally. So whether you need communication support in Kansas City or Kuala Lumpur, we typically have an office in every major market. So the scale and scope of the firm is huge, and I've been really fortunate in my career to work on really marquee kinds of clients. I kind of cut my teeth on Hallmark, which was a wonderful client that I worked on for 10 years, H&R Block, the University of Oregon, the country of Egypt, a huge range. I've had a couple hundred, I think it is, roughly, clients in my career. So the scale and scope of the firm and the profession is huge. And I've been really fortunate that I've covered a lot of ground as well. I started off in what's known as marketing communications. That was my sort of specialty. And that was the sort of thing that you think of when you think of publicity, getting reporters to write about a new product line or those sorts of things. I've also worked in the financial sector and healthcare and a variety of different kinds of practices. And now I spend most of my time in what we call corporate communications or reputation management. And this is where we're working with typically CEOs or people in the C-suite on issues of strategy and how they communicate as an organization overall. So that's sort of a sweep of the field I'm in. The work has to do with helping organizations figure out how to tell their story in one way or the other. So recent assignments for me, I'm in the middle of helping California cherry growers figure out what the right marketing messages are in Vietnam, Japan, and South Korea for selling their imports. I'm working with another industry on articulating the need to completely transform the way they market their products. I'm working with another client on a public education campaign about early detection of diabetes. I do media training with organizations like Fitbit and GoPro to help them prepare for presentations media interviews and those sorts of things. So that sort of sets the stage for the environment in which I'm working. And I would say that in the midst of all of that, there's a couple of really key things that go all the way back to the band room that have stuck with me. And I'd say the first one is maybe the single most important thing, which is the secret is there's no secret. And I know that's a phrase that I've heard you use, and I probably originally got it from you. But, one of the things that I've come to believe is you can't fake competence, and it doesn't come from dressing for success. It doesn't come from FaceTime and schmoozing and politicking. It comes from mastering your discipline. And if you're going to challenge the kid in first chair and you're second chair, you've got to be able to play that part better than the guy or gal in the first chair. And that's about competency, and that's about effort and discipline and practice. And there's no other secret. There's no shortcut. And you had us doing everything that we needed to do to succeed individually and as an ensemble, whether it was winning a competition or giving a great concert or whatever. And it was always about the details. And that had a huge impact on me. And that's a part of why I've been a hard ass, I think, is because the details matter. We can't afford to skip over this. We can't afford to let that slide because the details, in fact, are the secret. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Don't sweat the small stuff, and everything is the small stuff, right?
Everything's the small stuff. And I have a bit of a reputation. I don't mean it to sound immodest, but I have a bit of a reputation as somebody who I have a bit of a reputation as somebody who overthinks things, and which is the the flip side of being of caring about the details, is you can sort of wrap yourself around your own shoelaces sometimes, and that's something I continue to work on. But it's all important. And that's led to a related idea that I actually use in a lot of my professional development presentations as sort of a closing idea in my session on creativity and some other things, which is excellence is not a matter of doing something extraordinary. It's a matter of mastering the fundamentals. And that goes all the way back to the band room. How are we going to do a great halftime show? Well, first of all, your mark time better have everybody's knees matching, stick height on the snare line. It's gotta be consistent. All right. We can't even think about winning the competition until we win today. And we got to win in all of those fundamentals. The doubles have got to be open. The time's got to be solid, or whatever the case may be, that's where the excellence comes from. There's no magic things like, oh my gosh, they're so good because they got that something special. No, they're so good because they mastered the fundamentals. And I was reminded, go ahead. I'm rambling.
No. And those fundamentals, that becomes a whole composite of things. It's like once we allow bad behavior, we allow thoughtless behavior, we accept mistakes, we accept things that are wrong, then all of a sudden we have blurred that line of what is acceptable and what's not acceptable.
That's exactly right.
Whether that's making sure that there's no trash in your classroom floor, that your chairs and stands have been placed in a situation where somebody made a conscious decision to put them there, right? That's always what I do. That's my litmus test. Is like I look at something, whether it's a piece of paper or a project or a piece of music or somebody's classroom, and I ask myself, did somebody make a conscious decision to leave it at this state?
Yeah, I completely agree. I love listening to, I've checked out, the other podcasts, and I love the interview you did with Kevin Lepper because I was just so fascinated and impressed by, and I've known Kevin for a long time, thanks to you, but his intentionality. No, I have kids do it this way. My area is very clean and organized because I want them not to fall prey to that sort of sloppy, less than musician status that drummers and percussionists have. That sort of, Kevin's intentionality in his teaching just blows me away. He has a reason. He sets out with an objective in mind. And that's a fundamental, that's mastery of the fundamentals.
And I will tell you that when he was in his studio, his students lived up to that. And when a new student came in and didn't live up to that, I mean, the herd got on that student, that student would either conform or find maybe a different major. And I know, I know of one kid in particular who became a choral major, and nothing against being a choral major or anything. It's wonderful.
Sure.
And that may have been where his heart was. But I always had this inside feeling that he got into this herd. There was a certain culture there that didn't fit his personality, his desire, his values, whatever it was. And he said, I'm not going to be able to succeed here, so I've got to find an area where I find a better match,
Well, you use the culture word, and I was just about to say, in my profession, that's what we talk about in terms of culture and how leadership and communication all takes place in the context of culture. And culture has to be intentional. Now, culture is sort of like reputation. It's something that you have no matter what. It's when you are intentional about it that you shape it to what you want it to be. And that's really critically important in my business and in teaching. When I think about this idea of success coming from mastering the fundamentals, and I'm not a band director, so I can't claim to know this, but I'm assuming that when you step to the podium, there's sort of an inherent checklist that you're going through. Is the band in tune? Are the notes right? Before we can worry about phrasing, are the notes right? And then once we have phrasing, now can we talk about, instilling emotion? And, you can't go to the next level until the first level is achieved and you're monitoring all those fundamentals. That's what I'm doing in my work every day too. I can guarantee you that when we're off this call and I'm moving on to a client conversation, most of my conversations are going to have to do with me asking questions like, well, what are you trying to achieve? What's your objective? Well, what's your message? Well, is that defensible? Do you have proof points to that claim? I mean, those are the questions I've been asking for 30 years in my career. And I sometimes I think, well, this is hard. I keep, anyone can do this. These questions are obvious. But no, they're just the fundamentals of our profession, and you never get away from them. If you want to have great communications, you have to know what you're trying to achieve, what your message is. Is it defensible?
You have to know what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. Two little side notes to that. I remember spending some time with Dr. Harry Beejan, who was the retired director of bands at the University of Illinois. And when Dr. Beejan retired, I was at Vandercook, and we became really, really good friends. And he was working a high school band clinic at Vandercook one time. And he stopped and he looked right at the director and he said, if you hear a mistake, you stop and fix it. You don't let it go by. And it was that uncompromising kind of, that's what you do.
Yeah.
And the other one was a kind of a personal story. In the last one of the earlier podcasts, I spoke with a wonderful composer, Alex Shapiro, and we were talking.
Oh, that was a great interview. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And we were talking about a guy by the name of Bruce Bush at Hal Leonard Corporation, and Bruce is an incredible horn player. I mean, he went to Eastman, and he was just a phenomenal horn player. And I'm doing a reading session at the New York State Music Educators Conference one summer, and Bruce had brought his horn with him, and he was playing horn. And so we're reading brand new band music, and it's summertime, and everybody's kind of casual. And I look straight back right from the podium, and there's Bruce sitting there with his horn, and he's got his leg crossed. And so I get my hands up, and then I brought my hands down. I says, excuse me, but I said, we have a posture error in the horn section. And
flag on the play.
And everybody kind of laughed, and he kind of straightened up, and he never let me forget that down. He says, Charlie, that's going to cost you a scotch when this thing is over, But I mean,
listen, I I've been on the receiving end of you in those situations. I know it well. Yeah, absolutely.
So, to try and bring this back a little bit, we talk about culture. And when I meet with teachers, everybody goes like, well, do you have a set of classroom rules? And I go like, why do we always focus on the negative of it? Why don't we talk about a set of our classroom culture? These are the things we aspire to, instead of like, don't talk in class, no, we aspire to a climate where people respect each other and we listen to the teacher and we do our best to contribute to the day, by staying on task or something like that.
Yeah.
And if we approach,
I love it that you talk about it like that. I mean, this is something that I feel very strongly about. And again, it's a parallel. Some of the things we're talking about, we just find common ground between our two worlds. Some of them are things that I've brought with me from your world. But a year or two ago, I was doing some work with a client who I was helping to lead them through a process of refreshing their values statements. Actually, we did mission, vision, and values work, which can be a little bit trite, but can be really exciting and insightful and productive if done well. And we spent many, many months on this. But one of the things that I believe about values, the role of the value statements in an organization, is that the truer they are, and the more you lead from them, the less need you have for policies. Because the values will drive the behavior. It's exactly what you're talking about. I mean, you can have an employee handbook, and you have to. There's HR reasons and liabilities and all those sorts of things. You have to have that. But as far as bringing the organization together, it's not going to come together from the policy book. It will come together from the value system. But the error that most organizations make in their values is they don't really stop and ask if they are true. And they don't make the distinction between whether or not they are a mirror that they're holding up the organization, truth as we are today, or an aspiration of where we want to be. And you have to be really clear with people. Just as you said, we aspire to be. That's great. But some organizations will articulate a value that doesn't exist yet. And if you don't call it an aspiration, then what happens is people say, yeah, no, that's not right. If we say, well, we're an organization that respects all people, and if that's not true, then you actually not created a positive culture. You have people saying, nope, that ain't true. But values, the expression of who you are, what you believe, what is acceptable and what is not, if they are really true and you can point to evidence of them in the daily life of the organization, that's the most powerful way to bring people together.
John, we could sit here and talk for the next 48 hours because I love talking to you. It's one of my most favorite things in life, and you are such a joy. But we should probably end this for now. And let me ask: Will you come back and we'll continue this in a future podcast?
Listen, you honor and flatter me. It is always a treat. These are the conversations I've enjoyed for 40 years, and we can do it for another 40 as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, I know I wanted to go down the rabbit hole on some of these. It's irresistible. But absolutely, always at your disposal. It's always a treat and always a pleasure.
I just love talking to John Armato. He is such an incredible person, brilliant thinker. And I was so blessed to have him as a student, and even more blessed that relationship now is blossomed into friendship and collegiality. I respect him so much and appreciate him being on the program today. That's it for Band Talk Podcast 5. Next time, we are going to have a wonderful conversation with H. Robert Reynolds, the retired director of bands for many years at the University of Michigan, and most recently senior wind ensemble conductor at the University of Southern California, and a guy who travels the world and is the gold standard in our band directing world. And joining Bob will be Aaron Cole, a wonderfully successful middle school teacher in Georgia who now does a lot of consulting work and band clinics and workshops for both Con Selmer and Hal Leonard. So that's Band Talk. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.